Hello everybody and good morning. Welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 5th of December and you're joined today by myself, Philip Nuthard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. So this is episode 394 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. And we ought to give a bit of perspective to this week's show, because since last week, the world has moved on. So we're out of lockdown 2 in England. We're into tiers 2 and 3. Alcohol is banned from pubs and restaurants in Wales. There's a 2-week circuit breaker in Northern Ireland until the 11th of December, and Scotland's operating under 4 levels of restrictions. So there's still a lot to consider there.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate around whether you can buy a pint with a Scotch egg or not.
Yes.
And it counts as a meal, adequate meal.
A substantial meal.
A substantial meal, that's the one,
Yes,
adequate, substantial meal. So
as much as I enjoy Scotch eggs, I would never describe them as being a substantial meal.
Well, the whole debate is that started now as to how big those Scotch eggs are will determine whether they're substantial or not. But anyway, we'll lots going on. I mean, we say it every week now, don't we, Curtis? I mean, the changes just day by day, never mind week by week, are such a pace now. And can you believe we're already on the 5th of December and the snow is starting to fall and we're weeks away? We're 3-4 weeks away now from the Brexit, and nobody knows what's happening. But
yeah, exactly. We'll revisit that subject over the course of today's show. But you know what? Even in outside of the car retailing sector, it's been a monumental week in retailing because we've lost Topshop owner Arcadia. It's gone into administration. The following day, Debenhams announced its closure, and that was after JD Sports pulled out of the rescue deal, with both stores, I guess, victims of the pandemic, certainly, and also online retailing, because they weren't that well geared up to go online and offer an online service. But, there's no beating around the bush. It did make it one of the sort of blackest weeks for the British high streets that we've ever seen.
It does, doesn't it? It's not good reading, is it? Particularly at the timing of the year and the volume of jobs and people that are involved with that as well is it's not good for anybody. Just generally for the retail sector, into it, and kind of highlights the necessity for understanding that e-commerce digital proposition now and the impact that if you're not engaged with it that it can have on your business. So very interesting. What we must do is give a shout out this morning to both Donna Barnes and Steve Bolton, who are part of the Barclays Asset Finance team, who I have found out this week are avid listeners to the show. So Steve, if you are listening this morning on your Saturday morning run, good morning. And thanks for the opportunity for speaking this week to you and your team. So keep listening, and thanks for the continued support with that one. So
yeah, it's always good to have a shout out, isn't it? So thanks for the shout out, and that's reminded me. It's something we talked about some time ago. It would be interesting to know where you're listening to the show. So if you can just drop us a line on Twitter or LinkedIn, because we do have a number of runners. I noticed the other week Robert Forrester was preparing his lunch whilst listening to us. So just tell us where you are when you're listening.
And what part of the world you're in as well, because we do have international coverage. And you would be quite surprised of where some of the listeners are tuning into the podcast. But good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening this today. So we've got a lot of headlines this week, haven't we? And we've had to be fairly selective, because one thing that has happened this week is obviously the new car registrations for cars and LCV for November have both come out this week, haven't they? As that everybody's been eagerly waiting for, with everything else that's going on. But another headlines as well. So I don't know if you want to run through some of those first, Curtis.
Yeah, you're right. Headlines this week, we've got the new car regs and we've got the van registrations. We have some research from What Car, both on December discounts and also buyers staying in the market despite the pandemic. There could be a connection there. We'll see. We'll investigate that. We have some research from the NFDA on dealers recruiting more sales staff and technicians over the coming months. We've got an acquisition story in the DMS world. And finally, this week, we'll look at Bentley's solution to avoiding Brexit supply bottlenecks. They've come up with a novel plan.
They have. So to begin with, motortrader.com, we're heading over to the story there initially, and new car sales declined 27% in November as lockdown bites. And I think, I think everybody expected the new car market to be a challenge in November. We know there are supply constraints. We know there's been obviously the second lockdown and obviously then followed by tiered lockdowns in other areas. But a significant drop-off in new car registrations for the month of November, down to 113,000, I think, from memory. It's not great news, is it really? But, we need to put in context around the percentage compared to the actual number itself.
Yeah, you're right. So we are down 27.4%. And within those figures, privates took a massive hit, down by a third, 32.2%. Year on year, fleet was down 22%. And if you look at the year to dates for those, so private is currently down 27.3% in the year to date, and fleet higher at 32.9%. And year to date sales are looking at 1.498 million. Yeah. That's down 31%, down 31% in the year to date.
Yeah, so again, not great news reading. A loss of 43,000 units there, but significant increase for the alternative fuel sector, wasn't it? Again, further decline for petrol and diesel. So diesel is certainly continuing to drop off now. A year-on-year drop for diesel of 56.2%, 41% down for petrol, but a 74.1% year-on-year increase for the alternative fuel sector. So again, starting to see the emergence of whether that's BEVs or HEVs or whatever alternative fuel you're looking at, but actually that shift now is starting to really show a significant share of the market as we move through, and obviously the 2030 deadline starts to move some of those hybrid technologies into full EV, so that's going to be interesting when we start to break each section down and watch that sort of evolve as we get closer and closer to that 2030 deadline. But again, a significant drop keeps us on target for the 1.6 million new car registrations for the year. So I think really, depending on December, what comes out of December, which everyone will be watching very closely, I think there's a view at the minute, Curtis, that there's potentially going to be some activity in December. There is a little bit of appetite there for taxation. I mean, we did 148,000 last year, 144,000 the year before that. So, I suspect if we get anywhere near that kind of number, then, we'll just be just short of that 1.6 million or around the 1.6 million new car market month.
And then the anecdotal evidence around December, certainly what I've been hearing is that it did get off to a strong start, once the lockdown ended. Just briefly returning to November's stats, I like to get my highlighter out. Well, there wasn't actually much to highlight this month, but two brands actually increased their year-on-year registrations, and they were Porsche. They were up 16.7%, and Smart, who are up a whopping 141%. And in the year to date, the only brand that's outperforming last year is MG. Everyone else is negative.
So you've got some LCV figures as well, I think, haven't you, Curtis, this morning?
We have, yeah. These came in just as we started recording, so hot off the press here. Better news in the van market, as indeed it has been for the last few months. So new van registrations were up 8.8% in November. So this is the third consecutive month of growth for the van market, and that saw 28,500 vehicles registered. So vans weighing over between 2.5 and 3.5 tons, they really led the increase. They were up 25.2%, with just shy of 21,000 vehicles joining fleets before Christmas. And again, a lot of this is driven by the delivery sector, which is one of the few markets out there that's actually booming at the moment. So, that would explain these year-on-year increases we've been seeing for the last 3 months.
And actually, the drop off in the pickups and the 4x4s that are both segmented out actually supports that, because the pickups are down 56.2% and the 4x4s down 0.7%. So, but a very small percentage of the overall market within that LCV sector, but kind of supports what you were saying there around the demand for the LCVs, for these home deliveries, etc. happening. And interestingly enough, a slightly opposite happened in Germany, down 14.7% for LCVs over in Germany. So they're obviously not seeing quite the drive increase around LCVs that we're seeing in the UK market at the minute. So slight differences over there. And then moving across now to This Is Money, and this is the first of the surveys that you mentioned right at the start there, and you can always count on This Is Money to fully brief the story in the headline. So, December car sales kick off, motor dealers to offer an average of 7% off new models to recoup lockdown 2 losses, and motorists to get up to 22% off a popular VW family saloon. So kind of this is the work done by Watcar, as you said, Curtis, looking at some of the discounting and deals available through the franchise dealer network, available through December.
Yeah, this story caught my eye because it is aimed at a consumer audience. So anyone reading this is going to be thinking, great, I can get a good deal on a new car in December, which, if it gets them thinking about buying a new car, is probably good news. But the gist of this story is who's discounting the most, and the What Car research reckons the average discount on a new car across December is £2,700, with the biggest discount on a VW Passat saloon, which, in all honesty, I'm surprised they're being bought anymore anyway, because that's getting on for an old car in an old segment. But discounts of 22.3% according to What Car.
Yeah, and I think again, it's probably not the most popular car, is it? I think the Passat saloon at the minute, but again, looking at that sort of discount structure, there is a lot of focus, and we were talking about Brexit, weren't we, before with this morning's show, that some of the impact of what's around the corner for Brexit, around the rules of origin, potentially going to impact the cost of a vehicle, whether that's a vehicle bought in the UK, produced in the UK, or whether it's an import vehicle into the UK. The rules of origin do actually have a huge impact following the Brexit. So there is going to be a lot of focus from the manufacturers at the minute to try and move product that is available. And it will be on product that is available, because I think, looking at some of the production volumes through whatever country the vehicles are produced, has had a significant hit from the lockdowns in the countries through COVID. So, that availability of product is down. It's going to be down for the remainder of this year and into next year, through production inefficiencies that we've been hit. So the manufacturers will be focusing fully on the vehicles that they can supply and they can get to a consumer, available for immediate delivery or fairly swift delivery.
And I tell you what, Phil, I wouldn't like to be trying to work out those rules of origin because they are far from straightforward, aren't
Oh,
they? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
if you take a Mini, it's manufactured in Cowley, as we know, but the parts come from all over Europe. There's parts that are going to and fro. So, is it a UK built car? Is that the country of origin or not? I mean, difficult one to determine.
It is, and I mean, again, I've been sort of tuned into the FT Live Future of the Car event that's been running now for 3 days this week, and had some. I mean, if anybody hasn't caught up on it or been involved with it, fantastic interviews, and actually the first interview involved Alison Jones, who is head of PSA group, and she made it very clear. The OEMs are lobbying now to get clarity on the rules of origin because it's still unconfirmed. There is so much around Brexit, where that's tariffs or rules of origin, and it's not just about that built car coming to the UK. It's where it's, it doesn't matter whether it's a Nissan built at the Sunderland plant. It will depend on where those parts come from and how much of the vehicle are made up from parts from either EU or other areas of the market. So again, some significant impacts due that nobody has really got any answers on at the minute.
No. So next story is from AM Online, and it's 2/3 of car buying decisions unaffected by COVID-19, says What Car. So this is more research from What Car. It's an interesting one, this. It's a survey of over 2,100 in-market car buyers that was conducted by What Car. And they found that 60% said that their purchasing decisions had been completely unaffected by the impact of COVID-19. So this is obviously welcome news for the sector. But you dig a little deeper into this survey, and it also shows that 3% of buyers actually were prompted to bring their purchase forward as a result of the pandemic, and 5% have ended up buying a car who hadn't planned to at the beginning of the pandemic. So there's some encouraging figures in this one.
There is, and the fact that 16% of in-market buyers are still aiming to buy a vehicle before the end of the year, while 22% are looking to buy in the next 3 months, again shows the positivity and the fact that the consumers are still in the market, they're still looking at buying a car. Yeah, they may change the type of vehicle that they may have started to look at, whether that's new or used, and the type of vehicle in terms of size and costings. But positive news that you've got 38% of the customers surveyed that will be buying before the end of the year, or at least within the next 3 months. So I think that's positive news for the retailers, and particularly combined with what the previous story around the offers available on some of the vehicles as well. That a good time to buy, I would say, with that focus from the manufacturers.
So you're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector, and available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favourite podcasts.
So staying with AM Online, and this is the survey you mentioned about what the NFTA did, and so this is a survey on HR theme survey, which I think is the first, that one. I'm not sure I've seen the results on something like this before, so fantastic for the NFTA to do this. But they find that 54% of car dealers are to recruit sales staff in the next 3 months. So again, a positive news that the market is starting to recover, it's starting to look at the future and starting to think about 2021 and the activity that they need across the market next year.
Yeah, and on top of that, 63% plan to appoint new technicians over the next 3 months. So, yeah, we are spreading a bit of positivity this morning, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think Steve Nash. I mean, the interview that we had with Steve Nash, didn't we, from the IMI? You know, around the work that those guys have been doing around technician recruitment and the aftermarket sector, and the impact of Brexit on that sector, and the impact of COVID on that sector as well. So I think that will be positive news for Steve and his team at the IMI, that 63% are looking to appoint new technicians. So showing that growth of the sector, and in many cases it may be recovery from other losses and stuff, but I think it's great news that there is activity out there.
Yeah, and I guess what is it's also showing that despite the increasing digitization, and it's something we talk about a lot, click and collect, home deliveries, sales staff are still needed, and this has really been proven over the course of lockdown too, where showrooms and forecourts have been closed, but sales staff have still been in showrooms responding to inquiries, and dealing with customers, making appointments. So this is encouraging.
It is. And staying with AM Online, and this is an acquisition which actually demonstrates, it's talking about that digital e-commerce world, but car retail DMS giant CDK Global has been acquired by a US tech investor for £1.1 billion. So, a significant purchase from the guys in is it San Francisco they're from? So where are they from, those guys?
Probably West Coast. They're Francisco Partners.
So you suspect they are from that territory over in the US there. But again, showing that these a solution business moving into a tech now from that tech investment. So a significant purchase, particularly at this time of the year and what's been going on.
Yeah, and let's not forget CDK, that they are a global provider. The UK is the second biggest market outside of North America. I used to see these guys when I went to NADA every year, and they had a big presence at NADA, massive in America. Whenever we did dealer visits, they would invariably be using CDK. So this is a significant acquisition here, and it'll give CDK the funding to actually bankroll some of the R&D, some of the developments that they'd been planning to do strategically.
And finally this week, and kind of returning to Brexit, we're going to start talking about Brexit on a weekly basis now, aren't we, Curtis? We're moving towards that time.
You know what? It's like where we were 12 months ago.
Has it ever gone away?
Brexit dominated everything this time last year.
It did, and again, there is a lot of conversations about it. A lot. It's let's say the FT car event that's taking place this week. It's all about recovery. It's all about Brexit, what that will mean, what the manufacturers are doing, the EV growth of EV, Lotus moving into the EV sector and things like this. Lots of conversations taking place. But, you've got a story here in Automotive News Europe where Bentley hires jets to fly parts to Britain during Brexit. And if nothing highlights the challenge around Brexit of the aftermarket and what we were just talking about before, this certainly does, doesn't it? I mean, they talk about Bentley buying 90% of its components from continental Europe and sells 24% of its cars into Europe. That kind of sums up the challenges that some of these OEMs are going to face in a post-Brexit world, particularly for the UK automotive sector.
Yeah, and this story really did catch my eye because it involves, Bentley. Okay, we know who Bentley are, but in terms of volumes, they are low. They are low volumes, but they're hiring 5 Antonov cargo jets to help overcome these potential supply bottlenecks by flying in parts, including car bodies, so that they'll be flying those into the UK. rather than wait to see what happens. This is what they're doing, and it'd be fascinating to know what other manufacturers are doing. We spoke about Mini and Nissan. It would be fascinating to know what contingencies they've now got in place. But Bentley's certainly leading the way here.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I mean, Bentley's growing into it. I mean, if with some of the interviews we've done through COVID and Mark Lavery around that sector of the market, it is certainly a growing brand. They are in there talking about obviously being in Manchester. So there's a comment there that we have spent 2 years planning. We have, as you say, 5 of the jets on reserve to fly bodies to Manchester. So when you are catching your flight out of Manchester to Ibiza or Corfu or wherever you're going, you may see these Bentley bodies being taken from the flights that have been brought in there. So do you know what? As I said at the start, it demonstrates the risk and some of the challenges faced by the risk of a poor negotiated trade agreement with the EU. Because they do talk in the story about that Bentley would be able to absorb 10% import tariffs by raising prices and cutting costs. But this would be less damaging than supply disruptions. So again, highlighting there that the tariffs and the pricing isn't necessarily the issue. It is about the disruption within the supply market that we could face post Brexit.
Yeah, and with car manufacturing, and anyone who's been to a car plant will know just how lean they run. And the example here with Bentley was they would normally operate just in time with 2 days of stock. But by flying in these parts, they'll now have 14 days of stock. So that's 14 working days. So they'll effectively have 3 weeks worth of stock, which just gives them that cushion, that comfort to carry on production.
So, I mean, that's it for this week, isn't it? I mean, there is lots of stories coming out on a daily basis, and we have been fairly selective this week because of obviously the new car results and new LCV results coming out for November. But again, as always, head over to some of these platforms to read more. I think next week we'll have a look at some of the big stories coming out of the FT Future of Car event taking place this week, because certainly, I mean, if anybody's seen any headlines coming out, sort of the FT are sort of pushing some stories on the back of the interviews, and they've had some key speakers from across the world this year because they've done a digital event. They've run from 9 o'clock in the morning, and I've sat there at 7 o'clock at night watching interviews with people like Uber. So fantastic work they've done there at the FT. So next week we'll try and pick some of the meaty stories, of which the Bentley story was one of them. But we'll look at some of the stories coming out from the FT event for next week.
So that's all for this week's Headlines Roundup show. You've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Do join Philip and I again next weekend for all the chatter that matters. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.